I was wiping down the espresso machine when the man walked in for the first time that morning. Not unusual for a Tuesday. The corner grind filled with business people between 7 and 9 a.m., all looking for their hit of caffeine before the day swallowed them whole. I'd worked here for 3 years, long enough to recognize the rhythms, the regulars, the ones who always ordered the same thing without saying it aloud. This man was new. Tall, probably mid-30s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His dark hair was swept back with the kind of precision that suggested wealth or obsession, maybe both. He carried himself like silence was a language everyone else should learn. He ordered a single espresso, black. "That's it?" I asked, surprised. Most first-time customers asked questions, looked at the menu board, deliberated. He just knew what he wanted. "That's it," he said. His voice was low, calm in a way that felt almost dangerous. His eyes dark brown, almost black, met mine for a fraction longer than necessary. Not flirting, observing. Like he was cataloging something. I made his espresso. My hands were steady, practiced. I'd made thousands of these. But something about his presence made the simple act feel consequential, like I was being evaluated. He drank it standing at the counter, his back to the window. Didn't sit, didn't pull out his phone. Just stood there, completely present, like the coffee shop and everyone in it had suddenly become interesting. After he left, I realized I'd been holding my breath. The second time was at 2:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd just clocked back in from my break. The afternoon shift was slower, mostly students studying, a few remote workers on their laptops. The rain had started outside, that heavy autumn rain that made the world feel smaller. He walked in and ordered the same thing. Espresso, black. When I looked up, he was already watching me. His eyes were patient, deliberate, not the gaze of someone killing time. The gaze of someone who had cleared an entire afternoon to be exactly where he was. "You were here this morning," I said. It felt dangerous to acknowledge it, like I was confirming something I shouldn't. "Yes." He didn't smile, didn't offer an explanation. Just accepted the small cup, paid with cash, left a tip that was probably 30%, and stood in the same spot as before. This time, I couldn't focus on anything else. I rearranged cups that didn't need rearranging. I asked Marcus, my coworker, to make the next customer's drink because my hands felt unreliable. Through the corner of my eye, I could feel the weight of his attention, not possessive or creepy, but intense, like I was a problem he was solving. "Your admirer?" Marcus murmured, restocking cups beside me. "Don't know what you mean," I said. "Sure you don't." The man finished his espresso, also taking his time, and left. When the door closed behind him, I felt the air shift, like something had been temporarily suspended and was now resuming. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering if he'd come back, wondering why he would, wondering if I wanted him to. I had no idea his name, no idea what he did, no idea that watching me drink a cappuccino with Marcus would become the most important moment of his entire week, or that he'd already made a decision about my life before I'd even finished wiping down the register. He came back the next morning at 7:15 a.m. Same suit, different shirt, deep blue. Same order, same stillness. "You're making a habit of this place," I said, trying for light, trying to slow my racing heart. "Yes." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Too direct, too revealing that I'd been thinking about him. He held my gaze for a long moment. His eyes were unreadable, but not unkind. "The coffee's good," he said finally. It was a lie. Graceful, but a lie. Our coffee was mediocre. I knew it. He knew it. He wasn't here for the coffee. He was here for me. Over the next 2 weeks, he came every morning and every afternoon. Always ordered an espresso. Always paid in cash with a generous tip. Always wore expensive suits in dark colors. Always watched me with the same patient intensity, like I was something that required understanding. Other customers started to notice. "Your boyfriend?" A regular named Claire asked, grinning. "He's not. He looks at you like he's already decided you belong to him," she continued. "That's boyfriend energy." I didn't correct her the second time. The man, I still didn't know his name, began to establish patterns. He'd come in, order, position himself where he could see me work. Sometimes he'd read the news on his phone, but mostly he just observed. When I moved, his eyes tracked me. When I laughed at something Marcus said, his expression shifted just barely, but it shifted. When I made a mistake with an order, I could feel his quiet attention like a physical thing. It should have frightened me. It probably should have. Instead, I found myself doing my hair differently on mornings I knew he'd come, wearing the blue shirt he'd noticed once, timing my breaks so I might catch him before he left. I was being seduced by someone who hadn't even touched me. 3 weeks into his routine visits, the moment came that changed everything. It was a Friday evening. I was closing up, the shop empty except for Marcus counting the register in the back. I was wiping tables when the door chimed unusual for 6:47 p.m. Past closing. The man entered, but he wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him, both larger, both wearing dark jackets despite the warm evening. They positioned themselves near the door like they were blocking an exit. My chest tightened. "Hello, Mira," he said, and the sound of my name in his voice, he'd never said it before, never asked, sent a spike of fear through me. "How do you know my name?" I whispered. "I know many things about you." He stepped toward me, and I stepped back, my hip hitting a table. "What do you want?" "That's been complicated to answer," he admitted. "But as of 20 minutes ago, my plans became very simple. I want you safe, and you can't be safe here." "Safe from what?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and produced a phone. He turned it toward me. On the screen was a photograph. Me, taken this afternoon, walking home from work. A street I knew, completely ordinary, completely sinister now. "There are people watching you, Mira. People who know you come here, know your address, know your routine. People who would use you as leverage." His voice remained calm, clinical. "I'm not going to allow that." "Who are you?" My voice shook. For the first time, something like regret crossed his face. "My name is Matteo Ricci," he said quietly. "I'm the person who came here twice to see you, because I needed to be certain of what I was about to do. And now I'm the person who's going to get you out of here before sunrise." Before I could respond, before I could even process what was happening, the door burst open behind him. A man I'd never seen entered, gun drawn, and suddenly, the coffee shop, my safe place, became a war zone, and Matteo Ricci moved between me and the gunfire, like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. Everything happened very fast and impossibly slow. The shot came loud, shattering the case of pastries near the register. I screamed, or thought I did. I couldn't hear myself over the violence. Matteo's hand found my back and pushed me down, behind the counter, his body creating a shield. "Stay," he commanded, and I heard the authority in that single word, the kind of authority that didn't expect negotiation. More shots. Shouting in Italian, in English, in a language I didn't recognize. The 2 men with Matteo returned fire with a precision that suggested this wasn't their first time. The sound was deafening, overwhelming. My ears rang, my vision blurred at the edges. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, silence. Matteo knelt beside me, his hands moving over my arms, my face, checking for injuries. "Did he hit you?" I shook my head, unable to speak. His hands dropped to my shoulders, gripping gently but firmly, forcing me to look at his face. He was perfectly composed, not a single hair out of place, not a tremor in his hands, but his eyes burned with something that looked like rage. "We need to move," he said. Now. One of his men cleared the shop. I caught glimpses of the destruction, broken glass, overturned chairs, a bullet hole in the wall above where I'd been standing seconds before. The man who'd come through the door lay motionless near the entrance. I didn't look too closely. Marcus emerged from the back office, pale and shaking. "Jesus Christ, Mira." "She's leaving with me," Matteo said, not asking. He helped me to my feet, steadying me when my legs felt unsteady. "You stay here. You saw nothing. You understand?" Marcus nodded quickly, already reaching for his phone. Smart calling the police was probably the right move in this situation. The normal move. The move that didn't involve leaving with a man who'd just killed someone in my workplace. But I was moving toward him anyway. "I don't understand what's happening," I said, my voice very small. You will, Matteo replied. But not here, not now. His car waited outside, a black luxury sedan with tinted windows. One of his men drove. Matteo sat beside me in the back seat. The city blurred past outside, and I realized with a strange, floating sense of detachment that everything had changed in the span of 5 minutes. My normal life, the coffee shop, my small apartment, my routine was gone. Who were they? I finally managed. The Marchetti family, Matteo said, watching the street. I'm giving them what they want, eventually, but not in the way they expect. What do they want with me? Leverage. His hands were folded in his lap, completely at rest despite having just killed a man. I've been consolidating power. There are families who resist that. Your existence makes me vulnerable because I have something to lose now. Someone to lose. He glanced at me. They wouldn't kill you immediately. They'd make me watch first. The words were clinical, but they weren't meant to comfort me. They were meant to explain the calculus of his world, where human beings had value based on their proximity to power, where love was the ultimate liability. I need to call my family, I whispered. No, absolute. If you contact them, you make them targets. The only way they're safe is if they don't know where you are. You understand? I didn't want to understand. I wanted to wake up and find this was one of those dreams that feels vivid and terrible until consciousness returns. But the texture of the seat beneath me was real. The tremor in my hands was real. Matteo's presence beside me, solid, dangerous, strangely protective, was real. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. And then what? My voice cracked. What happens to me? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, there was something like pain in his expression. Then we figure out how to keep you alive while I destroy the people who tried to take you from me. I didn't know him. This man had visited my coffee shop 6 times. He'd spent maybe 20 minutes in total conversation with me, and most of that had been one-sided. There was no logical reason to trust him, no rational foundation for safety in his presence. And yet, when his hand found mine in the darkness of the car, I held on. The house was remote, set back from a private road somewhere that could have been hours north or minutes east. I'd lost track of direction. It was enormous, all stone and glass, built into the side of a hill like it had grown there rather than been constructed. My prison, my sanctuary, I still didn't know which. One of Matteo's men, the quieter one, with a scar that ran from his left eye to his jaw, showed me to a room on the 2nd floor. It was larger than my entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking grounds that extended into darkness. If you need anything, ring the bell, the scarred man said, his English accented but clear. Mr. Ricci has left instructions that all reasonable requests are to be granted. Reasonable? I echoed. You'll not be leaving the house. Beyond that, reasonableness is yours to define. Then he was gone, and I was alone with the enormity of what had happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, a bed larger than any I'd ever slept on, with linens that probably cost more than I made in a month, and shook, not from cold, but from the realization that the man I'd been quietly attracted to, the one I'd unconsciously started to dress for, had just become simultaneously my captor and my only protection from something far more terrible. Matteo came to find me hours later. I hadn't slept. I was still in my work clothes, sitting by the window, staring out at the landscape that might as well have been the edge of the world. The knock was soft. "Come in," I said, because what choice did I have? He entered like he belonged in every room he entered. He'd changed into dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes seem even darker. He looked almost civilian like this, almost like a man who hadn't killed someone today. Almost. "You should sleep," he said. "I should be home," I replied. "I should be at work tomorrow morning. I should be texting my mother back instead of ignoring her calls." "I know. Do you?" I turned to face him fully. "Because from where I'm sitting, you seem very comfortable with all of this. Like watching someone's life implode is just another part of your day." Something flickered in his expression, not anger, but something deeper. Acknowledgement, maybe. Guilt. "My comfort is irrelevant," he said quietly. "What matters is that you're alive, that you remain alive. The cost of that is temporary disruption to your life." "Temporary? You said they'll try to kill me." "They will try. I will prevent it." He stepped closer, and I didn't move away. Mira, I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't understand what's happening or why I'm doing this, but I need you to trust me for just a little while longer. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why do you care? You don't know me. I know enough. He was very close now. Close enough that I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the exhaustion beneath his composed exterior. I know you make your regulars remember their favorite orders. I know you smile at people who don't smile back. I know you're brave, Mira, even though you're scared. That's not, trust me, he said. Not because you want to, because right now, I'm the only shelter you have. He left before I could respond, closing the door with a gentleness that somehow made it worse. And alone in that beautiful room, I realized the most dangerous thing about Matteo Ricci wasn't what he'd done or what he was capable of. It was how much I wanted to believe in him anyway. The next morning, I found the house less terrifying in daylight. The grounds rolled away into gardens that hadn't been tended recently, the kind of deliberate wildness that suggested beauty was secondary to privacy. The kitchen, which I discovered by wandering, was all marble and expensive appliances, stocked with coffee that made the beans at the corner grind seem like poor imitations. I made myself a cappuccino, my hands moving through the familiar motions. The normalcy of it was almost painful. Matteo appeared while I was drinking it, arriving silently the way he seemed to move through the world. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian, his tone commanding but not angry. When he saw me, he finished the conversation and ended the call. "You slept?" he asked. "No, I didn't see the point in lying. I have questions." He poured himself an espresso, of course he did, and leaned against the counter opposite me. Even in casual clothing, even relaxed, he carried weight. The weight of decisions and consequences, of power held in restraint. "Ask, how long am I staying here?" "Until the threat is contained." "Which is how long?" "I don't know yet. Days, maybe weeks." I felt my chest tighten. Weeks? The Marchetti family operates across 6 states. I need to consolidate alliances, move my assets, and make it clear that touching you would cost them more than they're willing to pay. These things take time. The matter-of-fact way he said it made it sound almost reasonable. Almost. And my job? My apartment? "You won't be returning to your job. I'll arrange for your apartment to be watched but undisturbed. Your landlord will be informed you're dealing with a family matter. By the time it matters, you'll be safe." Or? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Show me," I said suddenly. "Show you what?" "This." I gestured around. "You, your life. If I'm going to be trapped here, if you're going to control my situation completely, I need to understand what you are." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise. Maybe. "That's not a good idea." "Why?" "Because seeing will change how you fear me. And you need that fear. It's what keeps you compliant." "I'm already compliant," I said quietly. "I'm here, aren't I?" He considered that, his jaw tightening. Then he set down his espresso. "Come with me." The study was on the other side of the house, a room I would never have found on my own. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held leather-bound volumes, some ancient, some new. A desk of dark wood held only a laptop and a phone. 2 paintings hung on the walls, one of a landscape, one of a woman I didn't recognize, done in oils, her eyes sad. "My mother," Matteo said, seeing where I was looking. "She died when I was 13. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. He opened the laptop. "Watch." What I saw next didn't make sense at first. Financial documents, property portfolios, business transactions that seemed legitimate on the surface. Import, export companies, real estate holdings, hospitality ventures, and then, interwoven so seamlessly you might miss it unless you were looking, a second layer. Corruption payments, bribes to city officials, protection rackets operating under the guise of consulting firms. A web of criminal activity so intricate and comprehensive that it seemed impossible one man could orchestrate it. And yet, here he was, orchestrating it. "This is what I do," Matteo said calmly. "I move money. I move power. I move people. The Ricci family has been doing this for 70 years. My father built what exists now. I've been expanding it. Why are you showing me this?" "Because you asked to see." He closed the laptop. And because you need to understand that I'm not a good man, Mira. I never pretended to be. The people I hurt don't hurt me back because I'm too careful, too ruthless, and I have the resources to ensure my survival. And me? I whispered. You're the first threat to that strategy I've ever allowed. He turned to face me fully, and there was no gentleness in his expression now. Only honesty. Keeping you safe costs me leverage. Keeping you here is a liability. And yet, I've still done it. Do you understand what that means? I understood it. I understood that he was powerful and dangerous and completely beyond my comprehension, and that he had chosen to protect me despite everything telling him not to. I understood that in some version of events, I was already dead, and this man had rewritten those events because of something he'd felt while making espresso in a coffee shop. And I understood with a clarity that terrified me that I was no longer the innocent in this story. I was complicit now. By staying, by not trying to escape, by looking at him the way I was looking at him now, I was accepting the darkness he'd shown me. Matteo, don't, he said, and it was gentle in a way that cut deeper than the honesty had. Don't thank me. Don't forgive me. Don't try to see the good in me and convince yourself I'm something I'm not. Just let me keep you alive. That's all I'm asking. He moved past me to a window that overlooked the gardens. In profile, I could see the tension in his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. He looked tired, suddenly. Burdened. There's a girl, he said to the glass. In the organization. My second's daughter. She's 7. She doesn't understand what her father does, and I've ensured she never will. That was her future if I was normal. He glanced at me. When they took her father in retaliation last year, I killed 6 people. That's the version of me you're living with now. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a choice, he said. You can convince yourself this is temporary, that you're a victim here, that I'm something to be pitied or even loved. Or you can see clearly and choose anyway. Choose what? To stay, to accept what I am, to live with the consequences. He left me there in the study, surrounded by evidence of his power, and I realized something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer simply afraid of Matteo Ricci. I was beginning to understand him, and that, I suspected, was far more dangerous. The days collapsed into a strange rhythm. Matteo kept to his own schedule, mornings in the study, phone calls in rapid Italian that I tried not to listen to, meetings with men who arrived by car and left within hours. I occupied myself with the house, exploring its corners, finding a library with actual books instead of just security documents, discovering a kitchen garden that was more ornamental than functional. We maintained a careful distance. Breakfast together sometimes, coffee in the afternoon, dinner most nights, during which he asked me questions about my life, my family, my dreams, before the world collapsed. I answered, watching him catalog information the way he'd cataloged me in the coffee shop. But there was something else in his observation now, not just interest, but a kind of hunger that he kept carefully leashed. On the 4th day, one of his men, the scarred one, whose name was Dante, informed me that leaving the house was no longer permitted. Just like that. The gardens I'd been walking in were now off limits. Orders from Mr. Ricci, Dante said, not unkindly. Why? I demanded, though I already knew. The Marchetti family made a move. They know you're with us. They're hunting. The fear that had been simmering beneath my skin since the coffee shop erupted into something sharper, more immediate. How close? Close enough that Mr. Ricci thinks you should be inside. I found Matteo in his study that evening. He was on the phone, speaking in Italian, his voice cold in a way I hadn't heard before. When he saw me, he ended the call. You're locking me down, I said. Yes. Because they're coming? Because I'm moving pieces into place, and I won't have you in a vulnerable position while I do. He stood, moving to his own window. The Marchetti are aggressive. They're making mistakes because they're desperate, which means they're close to breaking entirely. What happens when they break? I break them worse, he said simply. And me? Stays inside. He turned to face me. I've put 3 additional men on the house. You're watched from every angle. If a fly lands on a window, I'll know about it. Trapped, I whispered. Safe. It's the same thing. No, he said quietly. In a trap, you want to escape. In a cage, you can choose to stay. I wanted to argue with him, to protest the loss of even the small freedoms I'd been granted. But I was beginning to understand that Mateo didn't make decisions based on my comfort or my preferences. He made them based on survival calculus, and in his calculus, I was valuable. That terrified me almost as much as the Marchetti did. The symbolism started on the 5th day. Mateo left a gift on my bedside table, a book of photographs. Not erotica or anything suggestive, just photographs. A woman walking through a market. A couple in a car, hands intertwined, a family eating together. Images of ordinary intimacy, the kind I'd probably never have again. When I asked him about it, he said simply, "So you remember what you're fighting for." Later that same day, I found a small plant in my room, a jasmine, flowering, releasing its scent into the air. When I touched the petals, they were soft, fragile, something that required constant care, or it would wilt. I understood the message, whether he'd intended it deliberately or not. I was fragile. I required his constant care. Without him, I would wilt. It should have infuriated me. Instead, I felt something dark and complicated blooming in my chest, not quite acceptance, but something adjacent to it. The first real threat came on day 8. I was in my room, reading, when I heard gunfire in the distance. Not close, but close enough to register. My body moved on instinct, pressing me into a corner, making myself small. The shots continued for maybe a minute, then silence. It took an hour for Mateo to come to me. He was different, covered in a light spray of something dark. His composure cracked just slightly. His eyes found me, and something in his expression shifted into something almost relieved. "Are you hurt?" His hands moved over me, checking. "No. What happened?" "Probe. They were testing our perimeter." His hand lingered on my shoulder. "They won't breach the house." "You sound so certain." "Because I am." He cupped my face, tilting it up to his. His thumb traced my cheekbone. "I would burn the entire city before I let them take you." It wasn't romantic. It was possessive and violent and absolutely sincere. And my body responded to it in ways that confused me. I wanted to step closer. I wanted to run. I did neither. "You should sleep," he said finally, and I realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from restraint. By day 10, the house had become even more of a fortress. The windows were reinforced. Guards rotated every 4 hours. Mateo consulted maps and documents constantly, his phone ringing at all hours. I caught fragments of conversations. Northeast border, alliance with the Corsino family, weaken them through property seizure, move the shipment Thursday. This was his world in full operation, not the bloodshed, but the strategy. The chess game of organized crime, where lives were pieces and power was the only outcome that mattered. Except when he looked at me, something shifted in that calculation. On the night of the 10th day, he found me in the library. I was reading or trying to, but mostly I was listening to the rain and thinking about my mother, who still didn't know if I was alive. "You should call your family," Mateo said. I looked up, shocked. "You said..." "I know what I said. I was wrong." He sat in the chair across from me. "Not about the risk, but about your family's ability to survive the knowledge. They're suffering not knowing. I can arrange a secure call. No trace." "Why would you do that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because you asked me to show you what I am, and I did, and you didn't run. That means something. It means you're choosing to stay despite knowing exactly what you're staying with. I won't compound that by keeping you from the people you love." I made the call that night, and my mother cried, and I lied and said I was safe, and I'd explain everything soon. It wasn't the full truth, but it was enough to ease the worst of her fear. And when I hung up, Mateo was waiting in the hallway with coffee, a perfect cappuccino. Made the way I liked it. "Thank you," I said. "You don't need to thank me for basic humanity," he replied. "That's not basic humanity. That's you, giving me something even though it costs you control." He looked at me for a long moment. "Control isn't what I want from you anymore, Mira. I'm not sure it ever was." Then he was gone, and I was left holding the warm cup, understanding that we were approaching a threshold neither of us could take back. The threshold came on day 12. An attack on the south side of the property, Not the main house, but the gatehouse where 2 of Matteo's men were stationed. It was repelled easily, but the act itself signaled escalation. The Marchetti weren't probing anymore. They were committed. Matteo made a decision that night. "You're moving to my room," he said, not asked. "It's more secure, panic room accessible from the bedroom. If anything happens, you go in immediately." I didn't argue, though everything in me wanted to. The intimacy of what he was suggesting, sharing his bedroom while keeping a careful distance, felt like both surrender and torture. His room was larger than mine, equally luxurious but more lived in. Personal. A leather jacket draped over a chair. Books on a nightstand. A photograph on the dresser of a younger Matteo with an older man who had his eyes. The bed was enormous. Matteo set up a chair beside it with a book and water, settling in like he'd done this before. "You're not sleeping in the chair," I said. "I don't sleep much, Matteo." He looked at me, and I saw the exhaustion fully, then the weight of maintaining the house, managing the organization, hunting the Marchetti while keeping me safe. He looked like a man running on fumes and will alone. "Sleep in the bed," I said quietly. "I trust you." It was a lie and the truth simultaneously. I didn't trust him not to hurt the world around him, but I did trust him not to hurt me, and that distinction had become everything. He was silent for a long moment. Then he changed into dark sleep clothes and lay on the far side of the bed, maintaining distance like it was a physical thing between us. I didn't sleep either. I lay in the darkness, hyper-aware of his presence, the sound of his breathing, the space we weren't touching. The next morning brought news that something had shifted. Dante came to the room with a message. The Marchetti were fracturing. One of their subsidiary families had turned, offering information in exchange for protection. Another was negotiating neutrality. The organization was collapsing under pressure, but not fast enough. "He's in the study," Dante said. "Wants to see you when you're ready." I found Matteo bent over a laptop. Maps spread across the desk. Financial documents marked in red. He looked up when I entered, and something like relief crossed his face. "How are you?" he asked. "Waiting," I said. "Like I've been waiting since the coffee shop." "I know. How much longer?" "Days. Maybe a week. Once the Marchetti formally disband, once their remaining assets are seized or redistributed, once word spreads that touching a Ricci is fatal." He trailed off. "Then you can leave." The words hit me like physical blows. Leave. Return to my normal life. Walk away from the man who'd sheltered me, protected me, kept me in this beautiful cage. "What if I don't want to?" I whispered. He went very still. "What? What if I want to stay? Mira." He stood, putting the desk between us like it was a necessary barrier. "You're saying that because you're afraid of the outside. Because this place is safe and I am safe, and the alternative is unknowns." "Maybe," I admitted, "but that doesn't make it less true. You don't know me." "I know enough." "You know a version of me," he corrected. "The version that drinks coffee with you and shows you photographs. You don't know the version that ordered those men to burn the Marchetti's import facility. You don't know the version that cut off another family's money supply and watched their leader suffer the consequences." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do know those versions. You've shown me. And I'm still here." Something broke in his expression, a crack in the perfect control, a flash of the hunger he'd been keeping leashed. "You're here because you're trapped. Once the door opens." "I won't leave," I said. He turned away. "You don't know that." "I do." I moved around the desk toward him. "The only way I'd leave is if you made me. So the question is, do you want me to stay?" He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Maybe, without admitting things he wasn't ready to voice. So instead, he returned to his desk, and his maps, and the business of dismantling his enemies. And I stood in the doorway, understanding that we were circling something neither of us could quite reach yet. The days after collapsed into a different kind of waiting. We shared the room. We shared meals. We maintained a careful friendship that was beginning to feel like a sentence, a reprieve that would eventually end. Matteo's touches became more frequent, but no less restrained. A hand on my lower back when we walked, his fingers brushing mine when we passed a cup, his eyes on me constantly, like I might disappear if he looked away. And I felt it too, this pull toward him that was partly fear, partly genuine attraction, partly the simple chemistry of two people in close proximity over extended time. I caught myself watching him, wondering what his hands would feel like without the barrier of careful restraint. On the 16th day, everything changed. A phone call came through, and Matteo took it in the study. His voice was cold, final. When he emerged, he looked like he'd shed something, maybe the last of his restraint. "It's done," he said. "The Marchetti are dissolved, their interests seized, their leader is dead." How? Not by my hand, but because of choices he made in response to my moves. Details don't matter. "Then I can leave," I said, not as a question. "Yes." The word sat between us, heavy with all the things neither of us had said. "Are you sending me away?" I asked. "No." He took a step closer. "I would never send you away, Mira, but I need to know you're choosing to stay because you want to, not because you're afraid of what's outside." "How do I prove that?" He reached out slowly, giving me time to move away. His hand cupped my face, and his thumb traced my cheekbone the way he had before, but this time, there was less restraint in it, less control. "Go," he said. "Walk out of this house. Spend a day in the world. If you come back, then I'll believe you. And if I don't, then I'll know I was selfish to keep you." I left at sunrise. Matteo arranged it carefully. One of his men drove me to the city, left me with money and a phone, instructions to call when I wanted to return. He didn't ask when that would be. The open-endedness of it felt cruel. The city was overwhelming after days in the quiet of the house, noise in crowds and the smell of asphalt. I walked without direction, trying to remember what my life had felt like before. Coffee shops that weren't the corner grind, people who didn't know what violence looked like, a future that seemed possible. And I realized something. I didn't want it. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because the life I'd had before was small. I'd been waiting at the coffee shop, not living, and Matteo, despite everything dark and dangerous about him, had shown me something larger, a version of myself that could survive in his world. I spent the day in a park, watching families and couples and people living their ordinary lives, and I understood that I couldn't go back to that. Not after knowing him. I called at 4 p.m. The phone rang once before he answered. "Mira? I'm ready," I said. The silence on the other end was profound. "Already? I've been ready since the coffee shop," I said quietly. I was just waiting for permission to say it. Another silence. "I'm sending someone to get you." The drive back felt different. Not like returning to captivity, but like coming home, though home was a man and a house and a life built on secrets and violence. When we arrived, Matteo was waiting on the steps. He looked like he hadn't slept since I'd left. There was a rawness to him, a vulnerability that seemed shocking given what he was. "You came back," he said. "I told you I would. People lie. I didn't." I stepped closer. I went into the world, and I understood that I don't belong there anymore. I belong with you. In whatever this is. He reached out and pulled me against him, burying his face in my hair. It was the first time he'd allowed himself true physical contact, not restrained, not careful, just genuine. His arms held me like I might escape, and his breathing was uneven. "I need to tell you something," he said, finally pulling back enough to see my face. "I need to tell you before we go further." "Okay. The man who tried to shoot you in the coffee shop. The one He trailed off, jaw tightening. "He had a family, a wife, 2 children. I've ensured they have money and safety, and they'll never know it came from me. But they'll never have their husband and father back because of what I did." I felt the weight of what he was telling me, not just that he'd killed, but that he'd reckoned with the consequence. That he'd tried to make it right, in the only way he could. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're asking me to commit to you, and I'm asking the same. And I need you to know that my protection comes with a cost. People die because I choose to protect you. That blood is on both of us now." I thought about this, about the wife who'd lost her husband, about the children growing up with resources but without a parent, about the violence that rippled outward from every decision he made. "I accept that," I said. "Just like that? Just like that." I reached up and cupped his face the way he'd cupped mine before. "I'm not innocent anymore, Matteo. The moment I stayed instead of running, I accepted what you are. I accepted what being with you means." He closed his eyes. "Mira, I choose you," I said. Not despite the violence, not despite the danger, but including it. All of it. When he opened his eyes, there was something like desperation in them, the look of a man who'd wanted to believe this was possible but hadn't allowed himself to hope. Then I need to ask you something, he said quietly. Not as the man who took you from your coffee shop, as the man who's going to spend the rest of his life keeping you alive. He moved to the drawer of a table in the entryway and retrieved a small box. Inside was a ring not delicate, but bold, emerald surrounded by diamonds, the kind of stone that demanded attention. Will you marry me? I'd expected many things in that moment. His first time saying he loved me, maybe. A declaration that didn't come with the weight of permanence, but a proposal absolute, immediate, finished that was Mateo entirely. Yes, I whispered. He slipped the ring on my finger and kissed me, finally, with all the restraint he'd been containing since the coffee shop. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming and desperate, and everything I hadn't known I needed. His hands in my hair, his mouth on mine, the taste of him coffee and something darker, something that tasted like power and obsession. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. You're mine, he said. And there it was, one of the 2 times he'd claim it. The first moment of true possession. I understood the weight of those words. Understood that they weren't just emotional, but a declaration of practical fact. I was his now, in every way that mattered. I'm yours, I confirmed. He carried me upstairs to his room, and we didn't stop at the bed this time. For the first time since I'd entered his world, we didn't maintain distance. He undressed me slowly, like each piece of clothing was a secret he was learning. The gentleness was deceptive underneath. It was hunger, patience tested to its limit. His hands moved over my shoulders, my back, the curve of my waist. Every touch was deliberate, asking permission without words. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmured against my collarbone. I couldn't have stopped if I'd wanted to. There was something in me, a response that had been building since the first moment I'd seen him in the coffee shop that demanded this. The feeling of his hands on my skin sent shivers through me. Not from cold, but from anticipation. I don't want to stop, I whispered. He pulled back just far enough to look at me. You're sure? I nodded, and he kissed me again, softer this time, more intimate. His hand found the edge of my underwear, and I felt my breath catch. Everything in me wanted to move closer, but hesitation held me still, a ghost of the innocent I'd been before all of this. It's okay, he said against my mouth. I have you. His fingers slipped beneath the fabric, and I gasped at the sensation. Everything felt magnified, every touch, every breath, every whisper of skin against skin. He didn't rush. He explored, learning the shape of me, understanding the small sounds I made, and adjusting his touch accordingly. When he finally entered me, it was slow and careful, and the stretch of it took my breath away. He paused, waiting for my body to adjust, his jaw tight with the effort of restraint. Okay? He asked. Yes, I breathed. Yes, keep going. He moved with an intensity that should have been frightening, but felt like homecoming. There was no separation between us, no distance, no restraint. Just the 2 of us, and the fundamental truth of what this was. This wasn't just physical. This was the final surrender, the moment I stopped pretending I could walk away. When it was over, we lay intertwined, and I realized I was trembling not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of what had happened. I'd given him something I'd never been able to give anyone, and the vulnerability of that was almost unbearable. He held me, his hand stroking my hair, not speaking. Sometimes words were too small for what existed between 2 people. The silence was better. The days after shifted into a new rhythm. Marriage arrangements were made quietly, a small ceremony with just his closest men, conducted by a judge Mateo knew. The ring on my finger felt like a branded claim, and I found I didn't mind. I was his, publicly and formally, and that knowledge settled something in me. He was different with me now. Still controlled, still dangerous, but the restraint was gone from our private moments. He touched me freely, claimed me constantly, and I responded with a hunger I hadn't known I possessed. The coffee shop girl was becoming someone else, someone who could exist in his world. Mateo kept working, but the intensity diminished slightly. The Marchetti dissolution meant one major threat was gone, though others remained. But I understood now that threats were constant in his life, something to manage rather than solve. I was learning his world's language. One evening, 2 weeks after the proposal, we were in the study when a man arrived with news. I couldn't understand the Italian, but I caught the tenor something had gone wrong. Matteo's expression didn't change, but I felt the shift in him. "What happened?" he asked in English, for my benefit. "The Corsino alliance is fractioning," the man reported. "They're being pressured by the feds. They want concessions." "What kind of concessions?" "Access to your financial channels. They want to hide some of their assets through your networks." Matteo stood, moving to the window. "And if I refuse, they break the alliance. Move closer to the Marchetti remnants." I watched him think, understanding the calculus he was running. More money meant more power, but more power meant more scrutiny. More risk. "Do it," he said finally, "but carefully. I want every transaction tracked, every account separated. I won't have federal attention on my primary operations." The man left, and Matteo turned back to me. "You understand what that means?" "More risk," I said. "More people involved. More chance of exposure. More chance that this empire I'm protecting collapses. And when it does, I take everything and everyone connected to me with it." I stood and moved to him. "Including me?" "Especially you." "Good," I said. "Then we fall together." He pulled me close, and I felt him breathe out like I'd given him permission for something. The wedding ceremony happened 3 days later. Matteo had arranged for a dress to be delivered white, understated, the kind of elegance that suggested confidence rather than innocence. When I put it on, I barely recognized myself. The woman in the mirror was sophisticated, powerful, in a quiet way. She looked like she belonged in Matteo's world. The ceremony took place in a private garden. Just Matteo and myself and 3 witnesses, Dante and 2 other men I'd learned to recognize. There were no flowers, no music, nothing unnecessary. Just the 2 of us exchanging words that Matteo spoke with absolute certainty. "I take you as mine," he said, and the phrasing was deliberate, not promising to love or cherish, but to protect and claim. The brutality of it was honest. "I take you as mine," I repeated, understanding that I was making the same promise. The judge completed the formalities, and it was done. I was no longer Mira, the waitress. I was Mira Ricci, and that transformation felt almost alchemical. That night, Matteo made love to me with a possessiveness that was almost overwhelming. His hands marked me not violently, but definitely. His mouth found every inch of my skin, and he whispered things in Italian that I didn't understand but whose meaning was clear. Mine, only mine, forever mine. And in the darkness, holding him, I understood that I'd stopped being innocent the moment I decided to stay. What I was becoming was something else entirely, something that could exist in this world of power and violence, something that could love a man like Matteo Ricci without destroying herself in the process. The attack came 3 weeks later, on a night that started like any other. We were in the study, Matteo reviewing documents, me reading in the corner chair that had become my space in his world. It was domestic, almost peaceful, and I'd begun to believe that maybe the danger had truly passed, that I could have this quiet life with him. Then the house exploded. Not literally, but it felt that way. An explosion on the south side, close enough to rattle windows, far enough that it didn't breach the house's defenses. Matteo was moving before the sound finished echoing. His composure shattered entirely. "Stay in the safe room," he commanded, but I was already moving. "I'm coming with you." "Mira, I'm coming." His eyes flashed with something dark and furious, but he didn't argue. Instead, he grabbed a gun from a drawer I hadn't known existed and handed it to me. "If anything gets past me, you shoot. Understand?" I took the weapon, understanding that he'd just made me complicit in his violence in a way I hadn't been before. We moved through the house to the main observation area. Below, I could see the perimeter, and I could see what had caused the explosion. Not a bomb, but gunfire at the fence. A full assault team, maybe 20 men, trying to breach the property. "Corsino," Matteo said, his voice absolutely frozen. "They're betraying the alliance. How is that possible? You gave them." "It doesn't matter." He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian, full defensive posture. "No one breaches the second perimeter. The battle below was chaos and order simultaneously. Matteo's men, maybe 15 in the house, responded with military precision. The Corsino team was professional but outnumbered in terms of defensive advantage. Still, they were pushing, and I could see that some of Matteo's men were falling. "Why are they doing this?" I whispered. "Because I made a mistake," Matteo said grimly. "Because I thought I understood their position and I underestimated their desperation. Because the Marchetti remnants offered them something I wouldn't." Another explosion, this one closer. The windows rattled. Matteo's hand found mine, and it was trembling, actually. Trembling. The first time I'd felt him truly lose control. "If they get past my men," he said, "you go to the safe room. You seal it. You don't come out until I come for you. Do you understand? Matteo, do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. The battle raged for maybe 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. I could see everything from our vantage point, the way Matteo's men fell and kept fighting, the way his strategy shifted in real time, the way he was willing to sacrifice his own people to maintain the perimeter. Then I saw one of the Corsino men slip through. A guard had been injured, and there was a gap in the defensive line. The man made it to the door, made it inside, and Matteo moved. I'd seen him controlled and powerful, but I'd never seen him fight. The gun he retrieved from beneath the console was an extension of him, and his movements were trained, brutal, absolutely lethal. He left the observation room and intercepted the intruder in the hallway below. The shots echoed. 1, 2, 3. The man fell, and Matteo stood over him, not checking if he was alive, not hesitating, just moving to the next point of vulnerability. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The Corsino team withdrew, leaving their dead behind, leaving their wounded to be captured or executed, and silence fell over the property. Matteo climbed the stairs back to me, and his eyes were something I'd never seen before. Not human. Something darker. "You're bleeding," I said, seeing the graze on his upper arm. "It's not mine," he said, and it probably wasn't. I moved to him without thinking and cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. "We're okay." "I'm okay. You're okay." Something flickered in his expression, recognition of what I was doing. I was anchoring him, bringing him back from wherever he'd gone in that moment of pure violence. "I can't protect you," he said roughly. "Not really. Not if they keep coming." "You just did," I said. "You held them off. For tonight. But this is my life, Mira. This is what you married into. People coming, people dying, all of it centered on keeping you and me alive." I kissed him, there in the observation room, the taste of blood and adrenaline on his mouth. It should have been disgusting. Instead, it tasted like honesty. "I know," I said, and I stayed anyway. The aftermath was methodical. Matteo's men collected the bodies, organized interrogations, secured the perimeter further. I learned later that 3 of Matteo's people had died. 3 men I'd seen in the house, who'd served him loyally, and now they were gone because I'd been the catalyst for his vulnerability. But Matteo didn't blame me. Instead, he seemed to make a decision. The next morning, he came to me in the bedroom. "The Corsino family is finished. I'm moving against them today." "How?" "Every way I know how. Money seizure, property seizure, informant flipping, political pressure. I'm going to destroy them the way I should have destroyed the Marchetti when I had the chance. And then you'll be safe. The alliance will shift, the Marchetti remnants will scatter, and there will be a period of relative peace." "Relative," I echoed. "Yes. Because there's never true peace in this world, Mira. There are just quieter times, and we'll have one of those, and we'll build a life in it. We'll have the family you deserve, the stability you deserve, and maybe, just maybe, we can be something other than this for a few hours each day." He left to oversee the Corsino dissolution, and I was left alone with the realization that I was the reason 3 men had died. I was the motivation for the war he was about to wage, and I was terrifyingly, irrevocably okay with that. The Corsino destruction took 3 weeks. I didn't watch the details unfold, but I heard enough to understand the scope. Financial accounts frozen through corruption of banking officials, property seized on legal technicalities that probably weren't legal at all, key members arrested on charges that might not stick, but would tie them up long enough, leadership threatened, turned, or eliminated. A complete, methodical dismantling of a family that had existed for 50 years. Matteo conducted it all with the precision of someone who'd learned from his first attempt to consolidate power. No wasted movement, no excessive violence, just the application of force, financial and otherwise, until resistance became futile. And during those 3 weeks, I had time to think about what my choice meant. I'd chosen to stay. I'd chosen to marry him. I'd chosen to exist in his world, and in doing that, I'd chosen for 3 men to die in my protection. I'd chosen for the Corsino family to be destroyed. I'd chosen, through action and inaction, for violence to be the solution to his problems. On day 20, I asked him, "Do you regret it? Saving me from the Marchetti?" We were in bed, early morning, the light still gray. Matteo was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said, "but I regret the cost. I regret that my need to keep you alive has made you complicit in things you never would have chosen otherwise." "But I did choose," I said. "Every day, I choose. I could ask to leave, and you'd arrange it. Would you?" His hand found mine in the darkness. "Would you actually leave?" "No," I admitted. "I don't think I could." "But that's the thing, isn't it? I'm not leaving not because I'm trapped, but because I don't want to. That makes me mine," he finished. "Completely, voluntarily mine. Yes." He pulled me closer, and I felt him relax into it, the knowledge that I wasn't just accepting his world, but choosing it actively, daily, with full knowledge of what that meant. The morning the Corsino family officially disbanded, Matteo came to find me in the garden. The day was bright, almost aggressively cheerful, which felt wrong given the significance of what had just happened. "It's done," he said simply. "The remnants are scattering. The ones we haven't already turned will accept protection money to stay out of business. And the Marchetti? Dealt with." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. We stood in the garden, my garden, our garden, the space that had become mine in the weeks I'd been here, and something shifted. The constant tension that had lived in Matteo's shoulders seemed to ease just slightly. "I want to take you somewhere," he said. "Not far. Just for a day." "A day?" The concept seemed impossible. I hadn't left the house in weeks. "A day," he confirmed. "You've been caged long enough. It's time you saw how I've built this world." The city looked different through Matteo's eyes. Not the downtown core where the coffee shops sat, we didn't go there, but the neighborhoods where his power was concentrated. The commercial district, where he owned 3 buildings that operated as fronts for movement of various products. The residential area where he owned half a block of properties used for safe houses. The waterfront where one of his import companies operated. He showed me the architecture of his empire, and it was beautiful in a terrible way. Functional, efficient, brutally comprehensive. But what affected me most was the people. We stopped at a community center that Matteo funded. Inside, I saw kids elementary school age, middle school age, teenagers receiving services, after-school programs, tutoring, counseling. I watched a young girl work with a reading specialist and suddenly understood. "This is where they were," I said. "The family of the man who came for you. The man you killed." "Yes," Matteo said quietly. "Her father worked for the Marchetti. That's why they sent him. That's why I had to kill him. But his daughter will finish high school. She'll go to college. She'll have opportunities her father never did." "Because you're paying for them," I said. "Because I'm responsible for her not having a parent. This is how I handle that responsibility." We walked through the community center, and I realized that Matteo's world wasn't just violence and money. It was also an attempt at redemption that would never be enough, but had to be tried anyway. That evening, back at the house, Matteo presented me with papers. "What is this?" I asked. "An option," he said. "I'm setting up accounts in your name. Not just money, but legitimate businesses. A coffee import company, a small bookstore, property holdings, things that are entirely legal and completely yours. Why? Because if something happens to me, you're protected. Because I want you to have power independent of me. Because I want you to have the choice to walk away." I looked at him, understanding the significance. "You're giving me the same exit you wanted me to have when I came back from the city. Always," he said. "That's the condition of keeping you. You're never trapped. You always have a choice." I took the papers and set them aside. "I'll never use them." I know. But they exist anyway. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the woman who stared back. She wore expensive clothes. She wore a diamond ring. She lived in a mansion and was married to a man who'd killed for her. She was complicit in his crimes by virtue of her silence and her presence, and she was the happiest she'd ever been. I thought about my mother, who still didn't know the full truth. I thought about the girl at the community center, whose life was altered by Mateo's violence but also sustained by his subsequent responsibility. I thought about the 3 men who'd died in my protection, and the men of the Corsino family whose lives had been destroyed to keep me safe. The calculus was impossible. The morality was compromised beyond recovery, and I still couldn't imagine walking away. Mateo appeared in the doorway, watching me think. He didn't speak, just waited for me to finish processing. "I'm staying," I said finally. "Not because I'm trapped, not because I'm afraid, but because all of this, is where I belong." He crossed the room and kissed me, and it felt like the final surrender. Not the surrender of my body, which had happened weeks ago, but the surrender of my moral certainty. I was choosing him over innocence, and choosing it knowingly was perhaps the most dangerous thing I could do. 6 months later, Mateo held the most power he'd ever held. The Marchetti were fragmented beyond recovery. The Corsino were neutralized. The minor families had either pledged allegiance or accepted the terms of non-interference. The federal investigation into his activities had stalled due to corruption in the right places and lack of evidence in all the others. On the surface, it looked like victory, but Mateo understood what I was beginning to understand. There was no true victory, just different iterations of threat. A new family was rising in the Northeast. The feds had a new agent assigned to organized crime who seemed less corruptible than her predecessor, and the streets knew that Matteo Ricci had taken a wife, and in doing so, had given his enemies the most devastating weapon they could possibly use. I found him in the study on a cold November evening, exactly 1 year after I'd served him that first espresso. "What are you thinking?" I asked, moving behind his chair. "That love is the most catastrophic thing that can happen to a man in my position," he said quietly. "Are you regretting me?" "No." He pulled me down into his lap. "But I'm understanding the cost in ways I tried to ignore when I was just protecting you. Every moment I spend worrying about your safety is a moment I'm not focused on maintaining my power. Every attachment I've allowed myself to have is a leverage point my enemies can exploit. So what do? We survive," he said. "That's all we can do. We survive. And we try to build something better. And we accept that it will never be completely safe or completely clean. That's enough for me," I said. He turned to face me. "Is it? Really? Because you could still leave. You have the accounts, the means." "I don't want to," I said firmly. "Stop offering me that choice." "I can't," he said. "Because if I don't keep offering it, then the choice you made was truly forced, and I can't live with that." This was the paradox of Mateo, that he needed to believe I was free to understand that keeping me was right, that he wanted to destroy anyone who threatened me, while simultaneously knowing that his desire to keep me was the thing that made me most vulnerable. "Then we find a way to make this work," I said. Together, the resolution came not with fanfare but with decision. Mateo made the choice to step back slightly. Not from power, he still controlled his operations, still made the strategic calls, but from the violence. He delegated more to trusted lieutenants. He focused on the business side, the political connections, the things that didn't require him to personally eliminate threats. It was a compromise between the man he was and the life I wanted us to have. We began to build a life that looked almost normal. I started working with the legitimate businesses he'd set up for me. The coffee import company became my passion project, and I found myself actually learning about the trade, the geography of coffee, the people who grew it. I wasn't innocent anymore, but I was learning to be something else. Something that could exist in Mateo's world without being destroyed by it. 6 months into this new arrangement, I discovered I was pregnant. I told him on a morning like any other, while he was reviewing documents. His response was immediate and visceral. He stood, pulled me into his arms, and held me like I might shatter. "A child," he said. "Our child." "I'm frightened," I admitted. "I don't know how to be a mother in this world." "Neither did my mother," he said quietly. "And she taught me everything that was good about me. She also taught me that love and violence can coexist. But that doesn't mean they have to. Our child will be different, Mira. Not because the world is different, but because we'll make a different choice. I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. Or at least I believed his intention was true. The end came not as climax, but as settling. The new family in the Northeast decided not to challenge Matteo's dominance. The federal investigation stalled and was eventually reassigned. The Marchetti remnants accepted positions of subjugation or faded into irrelevance. The immediate threats neutralized into something manageable. What remained was the fundamental truth. There would always be threats. There would always be danger. But there would also be this, a man and a woman, and soon a child, and the careful, fragile life they were building in the spaces between violence. On a morning that felt no different from any other, I stood in the kitchen of the house that had become home and looked at the ring on my finger. The band bore new engravings, our wedding date, and soon, a birth date. Matteo appeared, the way he always did when I needed him. "What are you thinking?" "That this isn't a happy ending," I said. "Happy endings suggest closure, resolution, a moral reckoning. This is just continuing." "Yes," he agreed. "But it's continuing together, and you chose that. You choose it every day. And that makes it right?" "No," he said honestly. "But it makes it bearable. It makes it matter." He kissed me, and outside the window, the world continued in its terrible, beautiful way. The Ricci organization continued its operations. Enemies continued to scheme. Threats continued to emerge from unexpected quarters. But in this moment, in this kitchen, there was just us, a man and a woman, both stained by the world they inhabited, trying to build something good in the spaces where love could survive. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't innocence. But it was enough. Because I had come to understand that the most dangerous thing about Matteo Ricci wasn't his violence or his power. It was that, in knowing what he was completely, I chose him anyway. And that choice made freely, made knowingly, made over and over again, was the only absolute truth that existed in our dark, complicated love.